Well, tonight is our final night of week 13 of showcasing the ongoing war in Ukraine. This week has been just incredible. We've had so many terrific presenters going through a lot of obstacles and logistical issues to record with us, some in the middle of the night, some previously recorded, people all over the world. So I cannot thank everyone enough for coming in and doing that, and for everyone who's been visiting with us each night to see these presentations. Really terrific. So I want to thank Photo Shelter, Pro Photo Daily, Epson, and American Photography for always supporting us. So this week we started with Svet Jacqueline, then Sasha Maslov, Eva Seidish, Mark Edward Harris, Madeline Kelly. Tonight we're joined by Svet Bachevanova and Sarah Leen, who will discuss their two really, really important books documenting war crimes in Ukraine. So with that, I turn it over to them. So thank you all.
Briefly talk about the two books that we recently produced, Photo Evidence recently produced. They both are focused on the war in Ukraine. The first one covers the first year and a half of the war. And our main goal during this collecting the work of more than 100 photographers who submitted their images was to create a collection of war crimes committed by Russians on Ukrainian soil. And that's how the title came. Actually, Sarah is the mother of the title.
There you go.
We tried different things and always wasn't the title. And then she said, okay, it's a war crime. How about Ukraine? A war crime.
There you go. So what made you start? What made you, like, what was the moment and said, we need to put together a book on this?
As I mentioned before the beginning of this conversation, I grew up in a communist country, Bulgaria. And Bulgaria was hugely influenced by the Soviet politics. Even now, 50% of the people in the country support Russia in this war. So growing up in this country, everything was restricted. And there was no media, there were no news. Every news that come to us is by whispering. Somebody said that something happened and da, da, da. But in 89, I learned that the first anti-communist newspaper, people are gathering and start to creating this. So I had friends among them, and I entered that group of people. In the beginning was underground, but in January 1990, the first copy of the first anti-communist newspaper, Democratia, came to life. And from there, start a journey where so many people that have experienced the crimes of the communist regime were coming to us and just telling the stories, what they experienced. So that's how we learn about mass graves. We went to dig mass graves with intellectuals and that were killed shortly after September 44. That's how we learn about the concentration camps that were called otherwise by the regime, like working camps, but they were actually concentration camps. And then being a newspaper telling these stories, it became evident that there are no images. There are actually no evidence, visual evidence of what happened. Why? Because when the regime left or was about to leave, they knew that they're leaving, they burned the entire archive. Simple as that. So when the war started in Ukraine, I just know what's going to happen. It's going to be like, oh, that never happened. Oh, this never. I mean, as we had cases in the book about images that the Russian claims that they're not true. So when the war started, I said, we have to record everything, document right now at the moment. And that's how the idea of creating the book came. And we had an open call. Actually, it was the book award that we give otherwise every year. And we decided this year we dedicate the book award only to one topic, the war in Ukraine. And we are around from 12 years. We have the trust of the journalist community. So when we had an open call, And Sarah had many personal contacts of people that photographers working there. So we received tremendous amount of images. Like,
What was it, Svetlana? About 6,000 images, maybe
yeah,
5,000?
the first
Wow.
is 6,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
so everything else you guys were doing at that time really got pushed aside, and this became the main focus for both of you for that year and a half. Everything else stopped.
yeah. Yes.
Well,
We were on the front line
yeah.
pretty much.
So, yeah, what we've created here through this vision Svetlana had, is it's as much a historical document as it is sort of your regular photography book. It's
Right.
as much about documenting like what happened that first year and a half.
And the photographers were more than happy to submit images because I imagine the logistics on this must be an enormous task, right? To get the images, to get copy from each of the photographers, all of that while they're covering the war, right? Because this was happening in real time for you.
That's right.
I would just say, because I was managing that flow of images and with the photographers, I was afraid how it's gonna happen with 93 photographers. But being on the front line, that means you're very organized. You're very, very organized. So I text somebody and said, Fabio, I need this image. I saw it on Instagram. In the next 10 minutes, the images arrives because they don't have the time to waste. They just task like that, they just work. It was
Get it done.
absolutely fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And because we stay here on the cover, I want to say that the cover came from that image of Sergei Poznansky. It's an infrared photograph of the monument of Princess Olga, and protected by sandbags, something that they did in the beginning of the war and was kind of very significant. So we thought that this is a kind of very clear symbol of the strength and resistance
Yes.
of defending culture and nation.
And we
And the
should mention our
designer came with
designers.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the designer came with Fernanda Fajardo, came with the idea of this, and we immediately liked it. We didn't have two options or three options. No, it was this.
This was this, yeah.
Yeah,
You
she
knew.
created, we like it immediately. Yeah. I mean, some people had it. It's not a marketing cover. It's not something that people will discover among the 100 because it's not shiny or color. But I think it's a very strong cover.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's powerful, completely powerful.
It speaks of strength
Yes.
Yeah.
in an interesting way.
And how many of you were involved in selecting the images that would be in the book? Was it just you two, or you had a team?
It was the both of us. Yeah, and like I would do an edits and then send like a PDF once I started kind of doing some sequencing, and then I would get Svetlana's feedback, and she might have other photos maybe that I didn't have in there, and it was a conversation. We also worked with a young Ukrainian photo editor, Arinka Romotska, and I had met her at a photo workshop last September, or no, 2 Septembers ago, and she was on the sort of the darkroom faculty team. She was a student at the University of Missouri Journalism School, and I talked to her about working on this with us. And so Svetlana agreed, and so she was like our sort of insider viewpoint, so could send her the PDFs and get her feedback on which coming from the inside. She knows this, she's been living with this since 2014. So she was invaluable in terms of her inside knowledge and her feedback on the edits and the sequencing.
So from when you started to the complete book, how long did that take?
4 months.
Wow.
Well, more. I think it was more. I felt
I
like
mean, we started in October.
In October with the photos. Did we we had all the photos by October?
But I mean, the photos were coming all the time until I mean, the last photos arrived day before we went to print.
That's right. Yeah.
And we printed at the end of April.
And so,
But there
yeah,
were, I just want to say a few things
yeah.
that we decided in the beginning that has to be part of the book. You probably noticed that every image has a date and place and the name of the photographer. And this is just with the purpose to be a proof that
Ah,
it's absolutely correct. And in the beginning of the book, we decided we have to make, like, we selected the image of President Putin, and then we decided to include these newspapers that went on the day of the beginning of the war, the way the war was announced, just to set up the time and the place and the beginning. And from there, we thought we have to create something that is like an avalanche that people don't see usually on TV or newspapers, something that would overwhelm. And we selected 4 or 5 images, and every one of them represents a different war crime that is committed, every one of them. So that was the beginning, and from there, Sarah unfolded the story. And the idea was to have a kind of a horizontal story, which is the war. And every time when we have an option, we extend with a story that is much personal or involve
Can
details.
you move this forward so we see some of
Yeah.
this? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The font that we use in the book is called Mariupol, and is the only font that exists name on a city. It's created in 2017 based on the font that people use during protest demonstrations in Mariupol by 2 designers.
Mhm. And the book is completely 2 languages. So it's in English and Ukrainian. And that was very important for us to have a book that the Ukrainians could read and interact with.
And what type of input do you allow or do you welcome from the photographers? In that, I would love this image to be in, this isn't my strongest, but this is, I would really want that one in. Do you have a lot of feedback? Is there a lot of that going with, as you discuss the edit?
Some of the photographers who submitted larger amounts and of images or had a real significant sort of position in the book, like the Mariupol section is pretty much all Evgeny Maloletka's work. And so we with those photographers, there's a few that I would get on and have a conversation about this body of work and what was the most significant things about it in terms of making sure I didn't leave anything out. But it was 93 photographers, so there's not time to really talk to everybody. And some people just had one photo in the book, but there's a few that I discussed with and showed them the edits and got their feedback. Wish there would have been time to do that more. But yeah, so it was like some of the photographers we had that, and the rest was Svetlana and I, and Irinka, sort of, the work.
And when you're putting a book together like this, do you welcome that interaction, or does it become too time consuming? To your point of 93 photographers, how does that work for you?
Oh, I mean, I love the interaction and I want to know what they like for sure. And if I could have spoken to every single one about it, that would have been great. But I did with the few that had, as I said, large bodies of work that they had submitted. But yeah, it's always very special to know what the photographer is thinking and what they're choosing, because then you really kind of understand their storytelling better, their what they're thinking, what they photographed, and what the importance of this image versus that image. So the photographer's input is very important, and if you have the time to talk to everybody, then you at least listen. You might not agree in terms of this photo versus that photo, but basically hearing their point of view is really very helpful. I mean,
And
yeah, sorry.
Sorry, and I want to add that one of the new things that we introduce in this book is to have um, some of the photographers to write their account of what they witness while photographing particular war crime, which I see as a second layer of proof. One, we have the image and then we have the words. So 47 of the photographers wrote witness account of the day or the days they spent and photographing particular images that are in the book. So 47 of them were engaged directly with which of their images are included, what they're going to write, and so on.
And do you start a project like this with a deadline as it relates to getting to the printer and getting it out and getting it ready maybe for the holidays so people are buying books and things like that? So did you have a deadline when you started?
The deadline for our book is always before Visible Image.
Okay.
Because we try to present the book there.
Right.
And the photographers like to be presented there. And last year we had a movie made about the book, thanks to Jean-Francois. And so I think it's very useful. And then we try again in the fall to do a presentation in New York that is usually the Bronx Documentary Center. So we consider this as a release of the book there, here in Europe, and there in the UK. So this is the deadline. Usually April, the beginning of May, we print.
Right. Okay.
So this is an example of one of the accounts written by Hector Quintara. When he wakes up and then there is this blast, he goes there and he sees this tiny body of a 13 years old boy killed. And so this is an example. And this is that very, very popular image of Evgeny Mauletka, who, which was distributed also in Russian channels, claiming that that's staged. It's staged.
Right.
And this image went on to win that the World Press Award.
Right.
Yeah.
And this book was, we didn't pull any punches in terms of the imagery, and because this first year of the war was, so many civilian deaths, and with 93 photographers, you have a lot of photos of similar events, but it was really important to show this impact on the civilians during that year. And so I felt like Svetlana was very brave in making the choice to lean into this. So like in this case, I put together a grid of bodies that are just, somebody's coming home from the grocery store or something. It's like this horrific mass deaths over that year. And then we had, especially these images that we're looking at right now are from Bucha and are from mostly this one street, Yablonsky Street, I believe that was called.
Yablonsky Street.
Yeah, Yablonsky Street. And this was something the New York Times did, because the Russians were really saying, no, this never happened. We don't know how they got killed, etc. And they mapped out the bodies on the street. And so we tried to really, and then also this is a screen grab from a video that a street camera had taken. And these people, civilians, or at least in civilian clothing, were marched out and basically taken around the corner and just executed.
Yeah. So as you're putting this together, really a question to Svet is keeping the focus on war crimes. As you go, as you're editing through these images, that focus has to never leave your mind that we're documenting this. It's war crimes. Can you both speak to that as it relates to not losing that focus throughout the entire book?
I think that it's not difficult at all because
No,
every image that we receive
time.
contain a war crime or a version of
I think
war
there's,
crime.
we also added beyond the war crimes and the tragedy of what's going on, we have parts of this are on the diaspora. Everybody leaving. So we have images from train stations and people packing up their bags and leaving. And we have images of the people who were, helping like create food and sewing those camouflage nets and all this war effort from different sides, right? And was important, I felt, to show it, to show the life and try to tell stories, and basically just this book put together in not entirely chronological order, but generally in chronological order. So, and Arinka was great for helping sorting the timeline out. But yeah, so we have the diaspora people helping the various Bucha and Irpin and the early battles in Kiev. And so it's
And
a bit
here from
mhm.
the images
Kharkiv.
that
Yeah.
from Azovstal, that was really the
Yeah.
photographer gave it to us, and it was hard to find him. But
Yeah.
I think this is something rare that it's not published so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we had it has a structure, the edit and the storytelling. And there's like little stories within stories and work by, sections where all that section, the work is by one particular photographer. And so we could create those stories.
Okay.
And here we come to the second book.
Okay.
I'm
And
not
what
sure why it's so small.
uh so what made you go to the next book? What made you think we should do a follow-up?
I mean, working on the first book and the intensity of the situation in Ukraine and the political life around related to the war in Ukraine, everybody is asking me, so you did this book, so now what? You're going to stop? It just doesn't feel right. And so we decided to do the second book with the focusing on the consequences of the war crimes and the war, and how this affects uh, the life of children, the women that have to make life and death decisions without their husbands, the soldiers that return home and face PTSD, most of them, and how, I mean, all this is happening. So we had few themes that we want to touch, and we start collecting images. And for a second time, the community responded very strong, and we had even more images than in the first book.
Really? Wow.
Mhm. Also, I think that one of the big differences between the first book is this one goes all the way back to 2014, which is
Yes.
when the war really started.
Right.
So we have a section sort of at the beginning about from Crimea and things that happened early pre the most recent invasion. So we have a lot of work from we have the Crimea that Maxim Dondyuk so beautifully photographed, and we also have things from 2017 and 2018. The responses from the incursion into an annexation of Crimea and how that affected people's lives. So we have that also documented in this book. And I think for me, the challenges that a photo editor was, how do we make it different, than the first book? Because so many of the same things are happening right now as happened in year one. It's a different war, but it's the same war at the same time. So, and that was like, I think the biggest challenge for me. And then I, had this idea because we had talked a lot about, resilience and family and effects on children. And then we're going to have this historical section, but it came down to me to like love and war. We're going to talk about the war, but we're also going to be speaking about love. And that helped me a lot in terms of structure and creating edits. So it's kind of like a sandwich with war and then love in the middle and then war again.
Yeah, and Sarah, as you say, it's not going to be the same, a little bit different. Is that something that comes from your editing view, or is that something that we just have to be a little bit different so that it's different? How does, I mean, that's got to be somewhat of a creative dilemma to come up with, because you want them to be somewhat of the same because it's the same, characters. How do you adjust that?
Well, we had agreed and had discussed when the Svetlana said we're going to do the second book, and it was the same structure in terms of photographers submitting in an open call images, and then also we've seen work that some photographers had done and asking them for particular work. It has to be like a different book, right? You even though the same things are happening, you want to create like a new idea. And it's like, okay, now this is like living with war. It's past a year and a half. It's going into 3 years about now practically. And, so what's that like? What's that? How do you live and have your kids and try to have a normal life in these circumstances? So I think that was always the goal, and trying to do that and trying to create that book. So it's softer. It's a bit softer than the first book. It doesn't have that emphasis as much on the crimes.
Right.
And I think that that made it like really interesting to work on as an editor.
Right. So that becomes a new challenge, right?
Yeah.
So is that really constructed with your team sitting there discussing before the call goes out for images, or as they're coming? Like, how does that work just from a functional standpoint? Are we doing a second book, and now let's discuss what that should be?
Anna?
Yes. We
No.
decided to have I thought that it's a question for Sarah, so I wasn't really tuned. Sorry,
No,
repeat.
no. What I was asking is, so now we're going to do a second book. The impetus for that and the discussions around, okay, the second book will be this, right? And then you brainstorm around that, and at that point, then the images start coming in with this call, right? So.
Yeah.
And the call to the photographers, what is that, an email that this is the next book that's coming and we're looking for images in this vein? How do you send that out?
So we decided that the second book will be on the effects of the war on children. So one of the things that happened in Ukraine is the rise of the patriotic education. It's just insane. All these children dressed with military uniforms learn how to use arms. So we know that a great photographer, a friend of us, Diego Ibarra Sanchez, is photographing this from years, since 2017. So we approached him directly. We want to know about sexual violence on women.
Right.
And I know that Gail Gibbs has a project, very brave project, women for first time speaking about what happened to them. So we approach her. We know that Chris McGrath is doing work on PTSD in soldiers. We know that Fabio has the children with cancer,
And the
how they
prisoners of
live,
war. And the
and the
prisoners of
prisoners of war. So those are kind of the main, anyway, topics that we want to cover in the book. And from there, we have this top base and we unfold with singular images, with different, and it goes by Telegram, by WhatsApp, mass email, social media,
Everything.
everything.
Yeah. And the reaction was the same as in the first book. Images started pouring in.
Yes. lots of them. I don't know if it was 3,000 or it was more photographers, I think, actually.
7,000 images from 250 photographers.
Yeah. So a
And
lot.
they were down to 95 photographers.
And do you ask them for releases? You know, like, do they have to
Yes.
sign anything? Oh, you take, oh, you do all of that.
Once we determine how many images every photographer participates, there is an agreement.
Right.
And the image is mentioned what he would receive, usually books.
Right.
And we have signed agreement with everyone.
Right.
It's very simple.
Yeah, but as you say, it's simple. The administration of all of that has got to be an enormous task, right? I mean, you guys have it down to a system, but you know, until you get there, I mean, just all of that must be really, really hard to just keep it all organized. But once you got it, it's, you know, but you have to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're capable people.
No,
But,
I mean,
no, I mean, for me, the work is not only work, it's just, it's a passion. So when it's a passion, you don't feel overwhelmed by work.
right. Yeah, no, that's
And also I'm kind of very, very well organized. I mean, actually, I did the entire thing by myself.
really wow.
And it was
It's what you
nice.
do, right? It's what you do.
I like to do this, yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, continue.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been working on these two books has been like an amazing experience to look at all the work coming from the different photographers from the two books, and how dedicated and passionate and committed these photographers are to telling this story. And there's photographers we have from all over the world, really, who has contributed to this book. Of course, the Ukrainians and a lot of Western journalists from Europe and North America. But yeah, it's an amazing breadth of contributions to this book. I mean, they made it happen for us. You know, so the opportunity I had to look at everything and, you know, read about it. I mean, what a gift that was. Thank you, Svetlana. You know, I feel very privileged to have been able to work on these books.
And so I saw the one chapter there, hijacked education.
Mhm.
So that particular chapter, that comes out of the brainstorming initially, that you know we'll discuss what happens. And do you ever feel the need, the desire to get sort of an expert to come in and you know start to write something as it relates to children not getting their education in those formative years, some type of, like I say, an expert on what the ramifications of something like that is to these children as they're developing, and then that piece of their life doesn't get developed.
A big portion of this is in the text. Also, there is a quote from somebody that understands the issue. But those are things that they face now. This will continue for years. It will take many years for
Yeah.
this system to be recovered. Even they function now, underground, online, but it's a lost childhood anyway.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
That's clear.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is Lindsay Adario's story that she photographed for the New York Times Sunday magazine. And so we published this as a story, as opposed to about this young boy, and his mother's a nurse and works at a clinic, and his life is completely turned upside down. And a very, very wonderful story that Lindsay worked on, that we were privileged to publish.
Good kid.
And the idea also of, like, we both, Svetlana and I both, are seeing a lot of imagery out there, and so we'd see something, and then sometimes cut and think this is perfect for the book, and it had not been submitted by the photographer, and we'd contact them directly and say we'd love to add it to the book.
Right. And I can imagine everyone is at the conversation, yes, right? I mean, everyone recognizing, you two and the importance of this book, everyone's agreeing right away.
Yes, but yeah, I think almost,
Yeah.
I can't think of a situation where we were turned down.
No.
I come from this world where, I've always represented photographers in the commercial space, right? Photojournalists and getting them commercial work, but always to update their websites or their portfolios back in the day would take forever. So I'm a little bit jealous hearing you put the call out and everything started pouring in. I mean, I'm still waiting for photographers to update their websites, because they just don't do it. But hearing that, everyone jumped right on board for you guys is really wonderful.
Well, there
But
was had to pull a few teeth, to
Right.
please send the caption, but general, it just shows the commitment that the
exactly,
photographers add to this story, that they want
they experience all this.
Mhm.
And it's actually their statement.
Mhm.
It's a very, very important thing. Somebody in New York told me that these two books are the Bible of the Ukrainian war.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You can't,
that's serious.
yeah, you can't get a more profound compliment than that. My God.
And this story in particular is so interesting. This is Brendan Hoffman and Oksana, I'm going to mangle her last name.
Parfenyuk.
Parfenyuk. And they lived there in Kyiv, and they both had pictures in the first book, and in one of the ones that she published in the first book, she was pregnant at that time with this baby. So this whole story about bringing a child into the world, and having to go down in the subways during air raids, and how do you
being photojournalist at the same time.
Yes, and they're both photojournalists, and they both have other work in both books, besides this one story. That was a really, really great to have that as part of this book, part of the love part.
Yeah, there's always another story behind that story, right? I mean, just as you describe it, my God, I was saying to Sarah before, becoming a grandparent, just imagining having the little baby, in the subways, it's just impossible, right? The courage of these folks is just amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And this work by Natalie Kesar, she's been going to Ukraine for years, back and forth, spends a lot of time there, and has done like several deep dives with now she's like got a whole group of friends and everything. She's been there, so it's like a second home for her. And she did a project called Ukrainian Love Letters, where she did portraits of couples, and there's like a love story that goes with each one of these photos. So we had that as a series. We used and that was a really, I think, special part of the book is this section.
And how many different chapters are there? Like better or worse, love letters, education. How many different ones do you have in the book?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I
never thought about that.
I never thought about how many, but it's similar in the first book, which is a combination of stories,
Right.
And so one photographer's stories that they may have 4 or 5 spreads of the book versus single images,
Right.
And it flows back and forth.
Yeah, each sub story is a book itself, right? I mean, you could. It's sort of like a template. Let's do this. Let's do this. It's and I'm sure you have the imagery to back that up, and stories.
Yeah. and Carol Guzzi's work on this young couple
In
who
Florida, right? They rehabbed in Florida.
this one he rehab. This one is the final one from the series we had, and yeah, he came to get his prosthetic legs with his and proposed to his girlfriend, who was by his side the whole way. She like really turned her life around to take care of him as he was going through rehab and learning how to use his prosthetics, and it was just quite a story. And Carol did a fantastic job of photographing it and following it from Ukraine back to the US.
Yep. I guess another part of this is being more and more intimately, excuse me, intimately connected to these angels who are the photojournalists, right? I mean, what they're doing is so profound, to put themselves in harm's way. I mean, you talked about a gift doing, it's not work, right? It's a gift getting in, and that's what I found, with our projections events, like listening to these folks and hearing them and feeling them is an incredible gift. I mean, getting to know Carol and Paula and and Sasha and all these wonderful men and women is a gift that just you can't even I can't even put it into words what it's like to be marginally connected with those folks.
I totally agree. Yes, we were fortunate to do a panel discussion at the Bronx Documentary Center just last week, and we had 4 of the photographers
Him, yeah.
from the book, and then there was a couple others that just came and were in the audience, and just to see them and hear their stories and was just a wonderful event. And
Yeah.
They're all passionate people. They care about what they do, and it's so obvious. It's just amazing to be surrounded
mhm.
by
Yes.
them.
Yes. That is a real gift to all of them.
Mhm.
And I'm sure for them, being in a book that's beautifully designed and promoted, it's good for everyone, right? That they know that their work is treated with dignity, respect. It's beautifully done, all of that. Just, it just feeds on each other, right? It just feeds this editor, this designer, this photojournalist, this writer. Everyone has come together, at a level that is so sincere that, it makes you want to be part of that.
Mhm.
That's true, and also there is something else that big part of these images would never be published in the media. Never.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's and that, certainly can't be diminished, right? Because people need to see that, and having
Yeah.
this yeah, and having this outlet that you folks have supplied just makes it, I want to be in the next book.
Yeah, I don't want I want to be very clear. We should say things directly, show them directly the way they are.
Right.
Everything else doesn't make sense if you have a goal to reach people's hearts
Yeah.
and to kind of influence them to act. You have to be very clear, not that way.
Yeah, yeah. But you see, Svet, that's what I was asking, I don't know, about 25 minutes ago about that focus, that commitment to war crimes. Like you never lose that. It has to be clear, it has to be straight so people see it. And that listening to you just say what you said there, you see this unyielding focus that we're going to show
Mhm.
you the real thing.
Yeah, Sarah asked me how far we can go.
Mm.
And I said, to the end, we'll show just everything the way it is. Because they are images that it's hard to watch.
Yeah.
It's better if you never saw them, but they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think yeah, that's
No,
also
go,
that's
Sarah.
part of creating that, it's part of creating that historical document and and having the evidence. I mean, that first book is very much about that.
Right.
It's creating this document that here it is, here's what happened, here's how it happened. And it makes that first book tougher because it really focuses on all the loss and the war crimes. But I think it's also really important to, in the second book, to like have that pull back from that and focus on living with war more. And we still have it's like we're not pretending there's war's not going on at all in the second book. It's just that there's different challenges in the second book that people are facing.
And also, Sarah, the lifestyle that is adopted now as a result of the war, it is a war crime. It's a consequence of a war crime. I mean, having children living that way, it's a war crime already. So it's again recording the war crimes, but in a more kind of focusing in telling the story by somebody's experience, not just documenting it.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so I guess somewhere I was going to wait until the end. What is the next book? Right? I mean, look at those two smiles. My God. I mean, both of you from ear to ear.
Okay, so now is the moment to mention that the two books were supported by the Open Society, Western Balkans. And actually, I had absolutely unbelievable experience working with them, and the freedom of doing everything that I want. And then we had 14 exhibits supported by them, organized, traveling around. So I thought that we can continue really documenting Ukraine the way we do now, but we could find a way of organizing the Ukrainian photographers to do this. So I had this idea about extending photo evidence to Ukraine. For first time, photo evidence extend to another country. So we created Photo Evidence Ukraine. I applied with this project and we received funds again from the Open Society. So now in the next years, we're gonna publish the books from Ukrainian photojournalists covering the war since the beginning of 2014. So it's like a separate organization, but we work, so far everything is good. So the first book will be War Photo Chronicles in cooperation with the members of the Ukrainian Association of Professional Photographers that is established and led by Mstislav Chernov. Is the director whose movie everybody knows, 20 Days in Mariupol.
Yep.
So we have kind of good base to step. And I believe that when we finish the program, we're going to live in Ukraine a stable group of people that understand the bookmaking and the goal behind it. We could just withdraw and they could continue.
Yeah, one thing, just afterwards, if you send me an email with some of those contact names of these different organizations, so we could put them in the chat room so people can know where there's information and all these different things of what organizations are doing, that would probably be helpful to
Okay,
everyone.
I will do this.
Yeah.
I will do this.
So the story, documenting the story of the war in Ukraine is not over, right? There's still photographers, lots of photographers still working on it, both inside and outside of Ukraine. And there will be another book.
Great. All right. So that's breaking news. Great.
Yes.
Yeah, as it should be. I guess, the other thing is, how do you keep your stamina? Of course, it's an important issue and it's profound for our time. How do you keep that going for yourselves?
I just go to the beach every day.
Okay.
And have an hour just walking or just sitting, and because it was difficult. In the beginning, it was very difficult. The first book, it was just unbelievable amount of things that you have to see. And in some point, I felt like I start experiencing like PTSD.
Yes.
And then that was on the 5th month, and I said I have to go back a little bit. So I stopped dealing with that and focus on other things. But now I learn, and for the second book, I don't work 24/7. I mean, I said, okay, now it's 5 o'clock. Between 5 and 7, I'm gonna walk to the beach or walk around or whatever, do something physically, and then I'll be with my family and try to make things simple.
Yeah.
Because I was absolutely into that book. It was horrible
Yeah,
experience psychologically.
yeah. I I totally agree with Svetlana. That first book was really hard. I spent, so much time looking at all these photographs, and they're and the ones that aren't even in the book as well. So there's thousands, and I agree. I think I was starting to get some PTSD too after having to, because now I've got all these images in my head, and I found a period of time there where I was pretty much having a drink every night. It was intense, just to try to come down from it, every day. I have other editing projects I'm doing, so switching from the book to some of the other ones was a relief, and the same is just like getting out away from the desk and being in nature. I think where I live is like so important for that. But kind of working intensely on it and then pulling away and then coming back, and also the photography is what keeps me going. Also, is that just having the chance to work with these photographers and their images is like so important, and so unique of an experience for me that that totally kept me tied to the desk and trying to do the best we could with the images and the storytelling that the photographers have done.
Yeah, it's interesting that it came up this way because, I usually ask the photographers when they're coming in and they tell their stories, and I always ask, how do you deal with everything? And no one really thinks of the editor, the concept, the designer of a book, that they're going through something, right?
Yeah,
But
true.
as you both describe it, you're living it, maybe as much, if not more sometimes than the photographers, because you're looking at everyone's images that are so intense. And, I never really thought myself, never really thought of that space that you guys are feeling, that you need a break and you need to walk along the beach, and you need a drink. We only think, and rightly, of the photographers, the photojournalists, but
Yeah.
you guys and your whole team, right? I mean, all these other people that you're working with are in bed with it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Everybody was sad.
Yeah, it was sad to see the
Yeah.
consequences here, but the the dedication, we both have a dedication to this story, and creating these books as documents of the war, and that commitment and passion is similar to the photographers, what they have, but our lives aren't in danger.
Right.
I'm sitting safe at home looking at these photos after the fact. But the photographers who are working on this, I mean, what they're doing is nothing short of miraculous, I think, in
Yeah.
terms of covering this conflict.
I mean, many of them were very, very dedicated to the book. And I know that, like Chris Ochikone, he took the book to the front line, to a particular battalion. So we have picture of soldiers having the book. Then we sent it to the International Criminal Court, to the Prosecutor General of Ukraine. There was a delegation from the US with Kerry Kennedy and other people, so they brought the book there. We sent the books to 18 Republican senators on the Hill
Mm.
when they were wondering what to do with Ukraine. So we said, maybe, who knows, maybe we could change your mind. One of them was G.D. Vance. He did not respond to our book.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, that's why it's evidence, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you cannot look away from evidence. It's just the way it is. So, do you have any other stories you need to share with us? You
Uh,
know, some of the points, because I mean, like I said, we broke news that there is another book coming, so that's terrific.
Mhm.
Um, And I cannot thank you enough for doing this. When is the next live presentation? Where else are you promoting the book?
The next, I think it will be in Calvados, is the for War Photography Festival. It happened here in France.
Okay. Great. Good. Well, I can't thank you enough for doing this and coming in and speaking with me, and it'll be a perfect end to this now our 13th week of covering the Ukrainian conflict, and you guys were just wonderful. I can't thank you enough. And no, please, you always have a space on our platform to come and tell us about the next book, at any time, and any part of the process, and anything we can do to help you. All that is a phone call. So if one of you or both of you would like to have the final comment for this presentation, it's all yours.
Sarah?
No,
But
I think you should have the last
No,
word,
but
Svetlana.
my last word would be, I'm going to just quote the person that wrote the introduction for the first book. His name is Volodymyr Demchenko, and he was journalist, and now he's in the special forces of Ukraine, being on the front line. So he wrote about, speaking of earlier slaughter of Ukrainians, he said, "The grass is growing on the graves, the ruins are being rebuilt, the smell of blood and decomposed bodies disappears with the new spring, and it becomes quite difficult to believe what was obvious yesterday."
Hmm.
So this is what the two books exist.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
And I would just, if I could throw in one other quote that I was sort of a North Star, I felt about the books, and this was from photojournalist Nicole Tone. And in the first book, we have it printed large on a page. And she says, "In these images are the testimonies of the living and the dead who speak in equal terms of all that has been endured." And I think that's really sums up
Yeah.
a lot in that short sentence.
And I think that is that is the complete recording that we did today. But I'm thrilled to see that Sarah is with us this evening. Like I said, Svet is in France, and it's the middle of the night for her. So, Sarah, I know that was painful to watch yourself. You told me that you don't like doing that. But I think you did really well. You have you've captured the screen. Unmute yourself, Sarah. I think you're muted. Jay, are you?
Frankie's unmuted, but for some reason we can't hear her.
Hmm.
Sarah, are your speakers on, or your mic perhaps?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
good.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming in this evening, Sarah. That's really very, very nice of you.
Oh, sure.
To do that. So if anyone has, I mean, this is the young lady who put this book together with Svet, and what you're seeing there. Also, just so you know, if you go into the chat room, you will see all the contact information about everyone involved, and to purchase a book or both books if you feel so inclined. Sarah, what can you tell us?
Oh gosh, I sort of felt like I said about everything I could think of earlier today when we recorded this, and thank you, Frank, for that, and for having for featuring these two books, labor of love in many ways. I would just be here, and does anyone have any questions about the work that we did or the books, or you guys have I don't know if you spent time listening to the other recordings this week. I know that what Frank has done this year and last year with his interviews with so many of the photographers who have worked in Ukraine is really an incredible archive. I highly suggest, if you're interested in this topic more, to go back and listen to some of the other interviews. And I wasn't able to hear the ones this week, but I'm definitely going to go back and listen to the ones that I've missed. And actually, Frank, we had this, last week in New York at the Bronx Documentary Center. We had Wolfgang Schwan, Sasha Maslov, Natalie Kesar, and Timothy Fadek, all on a panel that I moderated. And I spent a lot of time listening to Frank's interviews with these photographers. And I pulled quotes out of his interviews that I used to ask in terms of my moderating the panel and getting them to talk about certain things, because you had such amazing conversations with them. But I've been very, very fortunate to work with Photo Evidence and Svetlana on these two books as the photo editor. I think I was probably pegged maybe for these books because, coming from the National Geographic, I'm used to looking at thousands of images and making sense of it. And these two were both definitely that type of project. And I sort of, I'm not afraid of looking at thousands and trying to edit it down. I sort of welcome that challenge. But I had a huge learning curve. I mean, I'm not Ukrainian, and this is like not my war, right? And I had a huge anxiety about getting it done properly, so that the people from Ukraine who look at this book feel like, yes, this is their experience. Yes, this is their war. And working with this another young photo editor from Ukraine, Irinka Hromotska, who works with the Kyiv Independent, was a huge bonus for me. She was my backstop. She was the person who double checked my opinions and my ideas and the edit and everything to make sure it, rang true for her.
And Sarah, but before you're starting a project like that, what do you do to get yourself prepared to get it right?
Well, yeah,
You're freezing every once in a while there, Sarah. I don't know if that's your connection. She's frozen for everybody, right? She'll come back. She's in Maine. I think she's in Maine. Sarah, come back.
Frank,
and be knowledgeable.
do you know if there's a local show, and we lost her?
Yeah.
Another event where they'll be presenting?
If you
Yeah.
Sarah?
It just went black for me.
You froze. But Mr. Tomko had a question in regards to where you may be presenting again. Is this another venue that we can see, or is that maybe on one of the listings in the chat room we can find the schedule?
Yes, I mean, I think that probably from here on out, Svetlana will be taking the lead on continuing to promote the book and have conversations and bring photographers in. And at least for the first book, I know she did that a lot. There was a lot of traveling expeditions, exhibitions in Europe and she would bring different photographers in to talk about it. I think she mentioned one in the talk that you just played, where it was going to be next, where she was going to do something next. But I don't have any situations where I might be talking about it as well. The photo editor is a little bit in the background, as we should, right? We're not like front and center. This is about the subject, and this is about the photographers and their work. And I don't mind. I sort of like being the mom on the side, watching my children in the talent show, and cheering them along. I'm very comfortable in that position. So, and I think that Svetlana is really. I mean, this was her idea to make these books. This was her dream. This was her commitment to make sure that this didn't happen without eyes on it and making that historical document. So she gets a huge amount of credit for committing, 2.5 years now to making sure this gets made and get out there. And I'm the lucky person who got to, do the edit and sequencing and make a lot of the visual decisions. But really this is all hats off to what Svetlana has done.
Sarah, to diminish for a second what you did is there's a French term, it's called bullshit. I mean, like putting this together, putting these books together is just, an enormous task, and doing it with class and dignity and commitment. And how does she convey that to you, that you buy into that?
Oh, that it was easy. There was no sell job on that. That was like, oh, hi, I'm going to do, because I've worked on probably 5 or 6 books with photo evidence now. And when she decided to do the Turn the Book Award, which is usually, she does every year, is usually a single photographer's work. And when she decided to open it up to an open call and do, a story about the book on the first year of the Ukraine, and said, would you like to edit that? It was like, are you kidding? Of course. I mean, it was like, yes, it might be my honor, to work on it, because I know a lot of photographers who are out there working on it, and I've seen the amazing work that they do. And it's always it's always a privilege to be asked to work with great photographers and have the opportunity to put your hands on their photographs and making the selection process. And also, I mean, I'm sequencing the whole thing. It starts here, it ends here, and all those decisions along the way. I'm going to make a grid of this, I'm not going to make a grid of that, I'm going to make a pairing. I mean, I'm doing all of that. And that is like, it's the jigsaw puzzle of the planet, right? But it's also like kind of fantastic to be able to do that with people with photography. It's like, oh, wow, I can't get enough of it. So she didn't have to convince me. And then, but I didn't know that she right away that she was going to do a second book. It was kind of in limbo about that. And then she wasn't quite sure, well, if we did a second book, what is that? And then she had the idea of going all the way back to 2014. And then we had, and so that brought in that previous work. So we had from 2014 to 2022 of additional work, which was really interesting because I wasn't as familiar with that work. And then, we had this idea of it being more about life. Well, adding in more about life. And then I had this like shower moment when, you know how you get really good ideas when you're taking a shower. I don't know if you've had that, but it's kind of a funny, weird thing.
This is a clean show, Sarah. This is a clean show.
No, it's clean, but you're showering all of a sudden, and I was completely, how do we make this book different? How are we going to not do the same thing? We have to do, it has to be not the same. And it was all about, okay, resilience and, living with the war and everything. And that sounds good. And I kind of did a first edit of it and showed her, and she was just like, no, she was kind of like, no. And she's really direct about like how she feels about things. So it was really good because she was just like, not happening. She was just like super bored with it. And I was like, okay, I have to go back. I have to rethink this. And I had that shower moment, and the words that came into my head were love and war. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're going to have the war, but love lives in spite of the war, right? And so it's like that became the structure for me in my head, like how to put this together. And then I was good. Then I was like off and running. And then when I showed it to her, she was like, I mean, there's nothing better than like getting a smile on Svetlana's face and pleasing her, and she was like, yes, it's like music. And I was like, thank you. Yes. So,
and are you in the same room with her, or
no,
this?
It's Zoom. We live on Zoom, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right.
I mean, we saw each other a week ago in New York, and I saw her the year before in New York. So we might see each other like once a year, but we're like sisters. We're really in step.
Right.
It's
And
nice. very nice.
How long does it take to know that we're thinking in sync? You know, we have this, right? And then it must roll like a train, right?
Well, you hope so, you know. I mean, it's like the proof is in the pudding in a way. It's like we're visual people. So we can talk about it and agree on talking about it and agree, you know, oh yeah, it's going to be like this, but it's like show me. Yeah, we're show me people. So it's like once putting the photographs together and having that, it's all about like kind of turning the page and the transitions, and one thing builds on the other, and one thing it delivers you something and makes you want to turn the page again. And it's so it's intuitive, or
Mm.
it's like you're working with a visual language, so it's hard to say it in words because it's so felt
Mm.
as opposed to spoken. When it works, it works. And for me, it's like Legos, and they snap together, and it's like yes, and they're all saying yes. The pictures are all happy. I love being next to this one, and it's yummy. And I use like food words a lot to describe it, like it's delicious, because I don't have the language to, in a way, explain what I'm feeling when the food is together.
And how do you challenge yourself creatively? Right, because you've done this before, and once you hit your groove, you're grooving. Like, what do you do to do you actually say I need to challenge myself to think this way or that way?
Well, every project is like a new, set of images, and it has its own challenge. And I think for me, I'm challenged on every one of them. Everyone is like, oh dear, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? But I'm also, I'm a lifelong learner, and I recommend this for everybody. I think that, I came from magazines. I came from working in a magazine and being a magazine editor. And that's like, checkers compared to books, which is like 3D chess, right? Because it's like you have the same size publication, you have the same paper, you have a family of typefaces, you have a certain formula, or we're going to have maps, we're going to have graphics, we're going to have X amount of text, and you get this many pages. So and within that structure, you can still do a lot of really cool things and mix it up. But a book is like, oh my God, there's like anything. What do you want to do? What size? What paper? Different papers, whatever typefaces. It's like, it's like crazy a number of options and choices. So each book is like its own crazy challenge. And for me to make the shift from magazines to book editing, which I'm completely addicted to and love, and I pray she always gives me books to do, is like I'm challenged so much, and I am trying to learn about books and editing books.
And how long were you at the Geographic?
Since I was at the Geographic, I left in end of 2019.
And how long did you work there? Editing.
Well, editing. Well, I started out as a photographer,
right?
And did like 16 magazine stories and had like 5 covers. And then I became a photo editor in 2004. That's when I was really editing till about 2013. And then I became the director of photography, and then I was managing the editors. But I like really missed, being editing myself. So now I'm back to that.
Well, for some of the folks here who aren't, photographers, us going through the magazines was seeing what you did, with, of course, not knowing you at the time, but like we got to enjoy what you did at the Geographic, and now here you are, the face behind the edit.
Well, there's a lot more faces than mine. I had an incredible staff of photo editors who did. I was part of that group, and then became their manager, but they there's a lot of love to go around in terms of the work that gets done in the magazine. And now I'm trying to learn how to play 3D chess.
And the process of a monthly to, a book, how is that for your brain?
Oh, it's just it's crazy intense. I mean, I think that I love the new challenge. I love dealing with those options. I love book design. I mean, all of those back there are photo books. There's a whole other wall here, photo books. There's some in the next room. I mean, I was at the ICP book fair last week, and it's like, oh dear, this is like a sugar attic in a candy store. It was awful. I was so overstimulated, I could hardly walk around the room. It's just like, I don't know. Photographers are makers. We love the print on the wall. We love the book in our hands. There's not a photographer I know that doesn't want to make a book. They all want to make books. And even like the one who's just graduated from college and working on a project, they're always going, I'm going to make a book. I'm like, good for you, but it's like but we're all looking at photographs digitally. We're all looking at them online, but we all want them to be physical objects. And I think that's so interesting. And I also think that it's because you can fall in love with the print. I have prints on my walls. I love them. And I have books. I love them. Digital, do I love that website? Not really. I don't love a website. I don't love a story like I love a print or a book. I appreciate it. It's utilitarian. I like looking at things that way, but I don't love them. It's because we're makers. Photographers like to make something. And it's a different experience when it's a physical object.
It's really intriguing to see how you've lost your passion after all these years. My God, that's so. I mean, you talk, you really do talk like you're in that candy store, and you have free reign. Yeah,
Well, I wish I did. It's like, I don't have the money or the space for all the books I'd like to have.
right. All of us, we're in the same category. But if you're listening, make sure we put the links back in to actually purchase the book. But if not, anyone can contact me directly, and I can get that to you. So is there ever a lull for you, or you're always waiting, or you're always working on there are all the links for the next project?
I've been
And let me just interrupt you. Subject matter. Like do you have a list of like, I won't work on that. I'm dying to work on this?
not really. I mean, I think when you're a freelancer, you might not have the luxury to do that, right?
Yep.
But so when I left the Geographic, I had read something about this. I decided I was going to have a year of yes, and I was just going to say yes to everything.
Right.
And I was going to raise my hand a lot. I was going to volunteer for things. And if somebody said, hey, would you help me with this? I go, yes. If you're going to, even if I thought, well, I don't know, do I really want to do that? I was going to say yes anyway, because I think saying yes to things opens a door, and then that opens the next door and the next door and the next door. And so it was great. Like one thing led to another. I think, oh, good, it's getting a little quiet. I'm going to actually go work in the garden. And then some random email would come by, and somebody would want me to jury a contest or help them with a grant application, or, and look at their work. And for me, it's like, if I'm editing work, whether it's small or large, like these Ukraine books are, I'm a happy camper. I love looking at photos, and I think I'm pretty good at sorting it out, and putting it in some kind of sensible order, and helping organize the photos and talking to people about storytelling. So I haven't had much of a lull.
Yeah.
And my husband is ready to kill me. He keeps saying, I thought you were retiring. And I said, I never said that. I said, I'm just not going to do that job anymore. And now I'm doing the job that I really like to do. So and I'm feeling a little weird that this is all becoming about me and not about the Ukraine books.
Well,
So
that's you took
I
you
think we
took my
should
question.
segue back.
Yes, no, you took the question right out of my mouth. I mean, how much has the Ukrainian experience become part of who you are? Because I mean, I'm sure each book that you edit and every story you do, it takes a piece of you. How
Mm.
far, how, because you mentioned, the stress and you need a drink and, all of that, had that happened to you before on any subject matter?
Oh no, never. No, I've never. Yeah, I mean that when Svetlana talked about the PTSD, it was like it's very hard to, it's so true because it's very hard to look at these kind of pictures of destruction, death, loss, grief, and be in a position where you're kind of making judgments.
Mm,
You're saying, I'm going to keep this one, I'm going to let this one go because I've got thousands of photos and we have only so much space. And the responsibility for that, is a huge weight. It's a huge, I was so worried about that first book and getting it sort of right,
mm,
whatever that might mean, and especially for the Ukrainian people who would see the book, right? That was like, I mean, they're the audience in many, many ways. This is their war and the document of their war. So there's a lot of, dark nights of the soul, like
really?
wrestling with that. Yeah, for sure. And thank God for Irinka, who kind of could ground truth things for me and give me her opinions and her thoughts about it. And yeah, she's lovely. And she worked also on the second book, and she's part of the project for this third iteration of, she's part of that. And she'll be even a bigger part of that because I think the hope is maybe there's like 3 books that we all work on together. And it's handing this like sort of publishing company in a way to them to run.
Right. And you're ready for that third book.
Yeah, I think so because I mean I've been steeped in.
Emotionally.
Oh yeah, I think so. Well, it also I haven't seen the pictures yet. I haven't seen the pictures yet. They're gathering and organizing the pictures for us, so I haven't really seen the photos yet that we're going to be dealing with. So but I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think I've been living kind of with this war in a sort of, a way now for 2 years, working, a lot of hours on looking at the photographs from the war. And I feel like I have a decent foundation.
Mm,
There's also a whole team, a Ukrainian team of Irinka and a couple of other photographers. I'm not so sure how much Mstislav will be involved in it, but so that it'll be like a very different experience. I'll be, just a person and a voice in the creation of this next book, but it won't be just me, which
right.
will be nice, which will be really good. And I'm sure I'll learn a lot from their ideas and thoughts about how it should be put together.
Okay. Beautiful. And is it easy to take a step away as it relates to something that's you're so passionate about in regards to like, not being the person, it's being part of the team? Is that I mean, did that get you back to the geographic experience?
I don't know yet, because I'm kind of a control freak and a micromanager. So it'll be
Nobody else here is like that, just so you know.
it'll be really a good experience for me to have to, do it differently, and but that's okay.
Right?
I'm up for that challenge, but I sort of get pretty passionate about all my projects, whatever I'm focusing on, I get, pretty excited about. So
Right. Yeah. Wondering if there's any issues come up with photographers and their opinions on which images are selected or edited or sequencing input. So, one of the questions in the chat room, how much input do we get from the photographers? How much do we listen to them? And how much is, going back and forth?
So if you're doing a book with like a single photographer, lots of books like that, right? Then a ton of back and forth. I mean, it's their book, right? And you as the editor are just facilitating their dream and helping them maybe see their work in a different way and helping them, because photographers, they're only their own worst editors because they're so close to it.
Mm,
They're not bad editors. If you gave any photographer somebody else's pictures, they'd probably be, going to town on it.
right.
It's so much easier when it's not your own work. So it's very hard when it's your own work. You climb the mountain, you nearly, got bit by the snake. There's all kinds of things that happen to you that make you feel that photo is so important. And then that a third person, the photo editor, the reader, they didn't have that experience. So, trying to parse that is why I think working with editors is so valuable. But I just think that I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here. You were asking me again, Fred.
No,
Or
no, it's
Sorry.
Frank.
Getting late, Frank. Sorry.
Getting late, it is. No, just the back and forth with sequencing,
Right,
all
exactly.
of that.
Yeah. So when you have a book and you have like 100 photographers, well, there's not enough time in the day to talk to every single one of them about the edits.
Mm,
It's just impossible. So you're just having to make decisions about the work. But there were several photographers in these books that had longer stories, that had a bit more, right? And so those photographers I tried to have a conversation with. I would show them my edit. I would ask them, have I left anything out that's significant? What do you think about this? And I can make changes
right.
according to what they had to say. And if it was adding more, then it would be sort of like, okay, we can add, but we have to take out because we can't really make it any longer because the book is already massive. So, but when it's a single photographer, there's a ton of back and forth, ton. It's like if you're lucky enough to work for a photographer on their book, it's so much about making them happy. You got to make them happy. It's their book. Their name is on it. This is their like dream come true, having a book. So my goal is to be getting it right for them.
Right.
How can I help you get it right? How can I help you like walk away thinking, I love it? That's what I want.
Right. And how much, I guess my last question, how much is it to, how invested do you become with the Ukrainian issue itself? The politics, the sentimentality, all of that, how does, going through this, um, put you in that world to have an opinion?
Well, I'm it's it's such a complicated situation there.
Mhm.
And my heart is like going out to the people who are living it, and also the people who are trying to defend their country. Can you imagine? Uh, and I'm very invested in seeing them come out on top. And what does that mean on top? I don't exactly know. Compromises may had to be made. How long? I think everybody maybe thought this was going to be short,
Yeah.
but now I think it's not. We might be very long. Uh, how much stamina does everyone have and the resources? I don't know, but I'm very attached to the people who are living there, sort of emotionally attached to the people who are living there. But I also have a huge amount of distance, just physically distant,
Yeah.
right?
All of us, yes.
And so it's hard to imagine. I mean, Svetlana has gone there and delivered books, and she's gone there a few times, and it would be interesting to ask her about it. But I know she's very attached. And I
Yeah.
keep thinking to myself, I should go. I should go with her on one of these trips. And I mean, if I get the nerve up to do it, I should go and see for myself and kind of cross that line because
Totally.
I'm
Yeah.
the other side of it
You
right
cross
now.
it.
And so I think about that.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, my wife can't hear me, but yeah, I think of that also. We'll see.
Well, Frank, maybe we can make a little trip together.
There you go. That's more breaking news.
Yeah.
But Sarah, I cannot thank you enough for coming in again tonight. It's a late night, and I thank everyone because we started late. We had a technical issue with Zoom, but I really, really do appreciate you coming in, and I'm so grateful for the beautiful words you said about our platform. I really do appreciate that. So thank you. And I thank everyone for coming in again. Again, if there's any questions, we still have time with Sarah. But this has been a great week of, again, our 13th week, and now we have over 50 presentations covering the variety sides of this war, and you have the links there for purchasing books. That really will end up being a piece of history. Yes, Sarah.
I want to ask a question. Frank, what got you started on doing this about Ukraine?
First of all, it's my show. I ask the questions.
I know, but it's only fair because I was so curious when I saw all the interviews you've done and all the time and effort you put into this. I thought, so what started this for you?
Well, I have, but they actually just dropped off. I have some Ukrainian friends, and it's more. But beyond that, that wasn't probably the reason. It was more of knowing so many of the photographers going there, putting themselves in harm's way. Putin being such a piece of shit, for starting this whole thing, and the outcome can be really, really frightening, right? I mean, we're not done with this, and some knucklehead makes the wrong decision. We could be in a whole other category, and having a lot of relatives in Europe. So it was all these things that were sort of brewing, and said you can't really let this just like it's not happening, right? And so if you have a little bit of a platform, the photographers, on and on and on, and the without the photographers, there's really nothing going on, right? And they're documenting history for us, and it's important, and here we are. As simple and as complicated as that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for doing all that. That is, I mean, you have really gone the distance. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and there's unfortunately there's no end in sight. So we're gonna continue to do it, and as long as people show up and want information, and you guys are doing your important work with the books, and yeah, I mean there's what else would you do, right? And the last thing I'll because I'll stop. This industry has been so good to me, as far as being a photo rep. And because everything I have, this house I have, putting kids through college, I mean, it all came from this business. And you have to give back. I feel really strongly about that, and I'm falling in love with the photojournalist and getting them commercial work was always the dream. So and I've been somewhat successful in that, with photojournalists, getting them commercial work so they can go do this important work that we're seeing. See, I bored Sarah so enough she froze. Yeah, so it's my little way of just, this industry is great to me, whatever I can do for it.
Yeah, I agree. Giving back is like really important. It's been very good to me too.
Yes. So thank you, Sarah. And I thank
you.
Thanks, Svet.
Thank you, everybody, for sticking with it.
Yeah, and I appreciate everyone coming in this whole week.
Yeah.
I know Jason and Jamie and Linda, you guys have been here, most of the night. So I really do appreciate. Mike also was there a bunch of nights, and Robert. So I thank all of you, Stephanie, for being there. And we'll do it again in a month or two, a couple of months, and and as I said today, Sarah. When the next book is coming, any new news that you have, please, share it with me, and we'll get it out to our audience.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Good night, everybody.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Again, thank you very, very much.